Hi, everybody. I'm glad you can be here. And I'm going to tell you just a little bit about myself and then take a look at two or three short projects so that you can see what my work is. The real thing you have to remember is hatchphotoartistry.com. That's the key to the kingdom. Okay, so a little about myself. I've been a photographer for 20 years now, professionally, and that's my fifth career. Obviously, I wasn't born yesterday morning. So I'm not going to go through what the others were, but I am going to talk to you a little bit about photography. The first thing is, what makes me different as an artist? I mean, there are literally over 500 million photos being uploaded every day, and the question is why anybody should bother with mine, and there are some reasons. The first is that I have a very global outlook on things. I'm interested in the whole world as well as its little corners. In my work, I've got a very strong sense of composition, and that's partly a result of having lousy eyesight. If I don't see detail well, what I do see is shapes, patterns, movements, colors, and contrasts. And that's one of the reasons that my work is strongly composed. Let's see, I'm passionate about some things. I'm passionate about climate change, which is going to do us all in if we don't do something real fast to make adjustments. I'm passionate about drug addiction. And I'm passionate about education, which is the absolutely key to doing everything else well. So, and the other thing is that I do have a sense of humor, and that sometimes shows up in my work, and it certainly makes life bearable. Now, about the work itself, as an artist, what I try to do is go beyond just capturing a subject. That's what everybody does that. That's what photography is. But I try to go and do more than that. I try to capture not only what I see, but how it makes me feel, and to share that with whoever eventually sees the image. And also, by extension, how what I'm looking at may make you feel. And my work is mainly representational, not always, but mainly. But I do want to make sure that whether it's a Photoshop exercise or not, that it always has a strong connection to the reality of the world as you or I could see it. And that does mean if we could see it and do long exposures with our very own eyes, which we can't. But what I'm saying is that I try to keep colors within the bounds of what humans can see. I try to keep edges looking more or less normal and not like plastic. And I'm not a big fan of HDR. Let's see, I photograph architecture, I photograph nature, I photograph people, though people I do less often than others. But let's just start with people. This, which I hope you can see, is a book of photographs of drug-addicted people and their life stories. This does get through to folks. It's been very successful. And the reason I'm mentioning it here is that whatever I'm doing here landed 10 of these pictures in the Hood Museum of Art for their permanent collection. And to me, that's a very big deal. This has helped the people who were subjects in the project, and it's also helped me, and it's called a lot of attention to the humanity of drug-addicted people. They're humans first, addicts second. So I'm not going to go on at length here. I could maybe just flip it open and you can see that it's organized with stories on your left and a portrait on your right. Who've we got? Oh, yeah. I'm not going to go into these stories now, but I just want you to see what's here. If you're interested in following up on this, you would go to facesofaddiction.net. Facesofaddiction.net. Well, okay, so I'm interested in architecture, as I said, but architecture is an expression of how humans are. And I did a project 3 years ago called Hard Times for These Times. This is active geology. It's the one I'm working on right now. And the pictures that are in here are designed to be printed at anything above 40 inches on the long side. Above that, they are supposed to be very, very big. Okay, the idea of active geology is that geology operates on very, very slow time, mostly. We know about earthquakes, we know about volcanic eruptions, we know about tidal waves. Those are all things that happen real fast. But most of geology is active, but it's slow. So this is a series of photographs designed to show geology being active geology, whether it's slowly active or right away now active. So I'm going to just walk you through. This is a photograph of the Matanuska Glacier in Alaska. It used to be 30 miles long. It's now 25 miles long. And those fin-looking things on the upper left have all been, those were ice that got turned on its side during the passage down the valley. And it's all melting, as you can see. This is a different view of the front of that glacier. Now you can see what I'm talking about, strong contrast, strong composition in my work. That one, by the way, has been printed at 10 feet wide. This is a close-up of some of the front panels of that glacier. And you can see the black stuff is actually gravel that's been picked up by the glacier as it scraped over the rock. And what I like about this is it sort of pulls your eye back into it. This is a picture called glacier skin. And what it shows you is that glaciers really are rivers, but they're rivers of ice and they move pretty slowly. But you can see here, you can see how the current flows, you can see the ripples, you can see how the course of the river is bending. This is the Portlock Glacier south of Kachemak Bay in Alaska. Next one here is a glacier calving, throwing off bits of itself. This one happens to be the Northwest Glacier, which is outside of Seward, Alaska. And I told you I see shapes and patterns in my work. Well, this black and white is a really good example of that. That's another chunk of the Northwest Glacier. And it has carved this almost perfectly round shape as it dumps the ice off. This is, I blanked on the name of the volcano. It's one of the larger ones in Alaska. It's still active, as you can see. And there's a fishing boat in there that gives you an idea of just how immense this thing is. In larger scale, you can actually see the running lights on the fishing boat in more detail. This was taken at about 11 o'clock at night in August. And there's still all that light in the sky. Here you're looking at the Athabasca Glacier, and that's Athabasca Mountain. The glacier is in the next shot. This has been printed at 4 feet wide by 2 feet tall, and it looks spectacular. This is the Athabasca Glacier itself, and what you can't see is where, if you can see my cursor, down at the first sort of line across here, there's a little black thing. That's a 100-foot-long bust. And those little dots are people, and that gives you scale. This glacier has greatly reduced in size in just the last 10 years. It used to fill up much more of this valley. You can see for yourself how it shrunk away from the sides of the valley. That's this picture. This is active geology, you know, and it was 8 years between the time I took this picture and the time I took that one. This is Mount Edith Cavell. It's in Alberta. And all of this used to be full of ice. It used to be a glacier. And one day about 8 years ago, what you can't see above this top bit of snow in the center was a half a mile long hunk of ice that was another glacier, and it fell down and collapsed and created a flood down the valley. This is in Jasper. This is the Maline River, as in malign or malignant. And it originates about 8 miles from where this waterfall is, and it flows underground for most of that distance. And then it surfaces, and you get things like this. And you can see how it's carved the limestone here. This is a very ancient rock, and the waterfall not only has carved it, it is carving it. This is active geology. Here you get to see a mountainside and the remains of a forest fire, new growth coming in. And if you look down here in the where my cursor is, if you can see it, just at the spot that's would be on the thirds line if you divvy this up, you can see that there's green stuff starting to grow in there. And what happens is that trees take hold, well, lichen and mosses take hold, and then trees take hold. They create soil for other trees to take hold, but their roots break the rock. So this is a very slow erosion process. And I like this picture because it gives you different parts of that process all going on at the same time. This is Yosemite. This is a fumarole, and it's active, all right. You can plainly see. A fumarole emits stinking clouds of gases of various sorts. This one happened to have a lot of sulfur in it, so it really stunk. This was taken about 7:30 in the morning in late September. It was really cold. Welcome to the Grand Canyon. This is not a view you'll usually see. This is pre-dawn, or just at dawn. And the lighter areas here where the sun is just starting to kick in, and the rest of it's all in shadow. But even so, you can see the variety and wealth of colors and shapes. And you can see the stratification in the lower left corner. You can see some of it in the lower center, and you can see some of it in the upper right and upper center. This is Haleakala volcano in Maui. It actually formed the island of Maui. This thing is about 30 miles wide all told. And it just looks like nothing else on Earth. The colors are actual, and it has this, the different colors come from different minerals being laid down in different eruptions. And by the way, this is not a dead volcano, it's dormant, and it could very well go off. This is a coral atoll between Maui and Molokai. And here you can see the activity, you can see that the depths are revealed by the darkness of the colors. So this very white stuff is surf, the next lighter stuff is a little bit of sand on the surface or just under it, and from there it gets darker all the way. The pinkish stuff up here is some kind of life form that's made a deposit in the water. So this is active geology. So is that. This is a pond in which many geysers erupt all the time, and it's mud, so they're going go up, go up. It's quite something to see. It's also something to smell. This is another New Zealand picture showing volcanic activity that's still ongoing. You can see there was a whole volcanic crater here, and now what's left is this little lake, which is very hot. And a bunch of birds, many birds live in the cliffside here. They like the warmth that incubates their eggs for them, and nobody's going to come and get them up there. This is also New Zealand, the Punaiki rocks, and you can see they're kind of pancake layered. That's because those were layers of sediment. There were the millions, literally millions of years ago, the seas, when life first formed up, there were good years and bad years. And the good years, they formed softer stone when they died and fell to the bottom. And in the bad years, they formed weaker shells, so skinnier layers. And then in the better years, they formed thicker shells, and hence thicker layers of sediment. This is now still actively being torn up by the surf that's coming through there, and it will go back to being sand on the sea bottom sooner or later. This is active geology. The ocean, this is at the same location as the rocks you just saw. The ocean comes up and gets into fissures in the rocks, and it's coming in with such pressure that it blows jets like that. That's not steam, that's just seawater. And it's, again, something to see. Glacial retreat in New Zealand. That glacier back in the left-hand corner, 5 years ago, was where I was standing to take this picture. This is climate change. Okay, that takes care of it, and I think it's time I wrapped up anyway.
Do you revisit the site and take pictures in different years?
If I can, yes. In the case of the Athabasca Glacier, yes, I went through there eight years before. I spent a summer in Alaska in 2010, and the picture and I took the first of those pictures, and then the one you saw was taken in 2018.
Have you exhibit the same site? You took those pictures in different years. Have you arranged them all together? Have an exhibit?
That's the idea. The 25 pictures you saw are intended to be one exhibit. And there are some other things that are more explanatory. There's a side-by-side on that particular glacier, for example. And there are some other pictures that aren't here. But yes, this is the short answer. You
Yeah.
saw about Northwest Glacier. If you look at the computer screen here, you can see that photograph up on the wall as a 20 by 30 framed in museum glass. So I want to close by asking everybody, please go to hatchphotoartistry, all one word, .com.